Hello, this is Mad Cat, the angry egalitarian that discusses this and that. Today we will be discussing men must prove consent with sex with women. And remember, believing that women never lie is a way of lying to yourself. Now today is a special episode as I am joined with Marshall, also known as the Observing Libertarian. A man who's always quick with any fact that he has. He can pull up the article immediately. Care to introduce yourself, Marshall?
Greetings, I am Marshall. I have been published on the National Coalition for Men, A Voice for Men, JudgyBitch.com, and I also have my own column on the Honey Badger Brigade. I've been featured in several hangouts with the Honey Badgers, and also I've been featured a couple times on their Thursday night broadcasts.
Awesome. It's a great honor to have you on this show. I've been a fan of yours since I became part of the Honey Badgers, especially with the martial laws, which I hope we talk about a little bit today. But let's go ahead and get started with our main topic today, doing the screen share thing. By the way, if you're on the YouTube channel, I am... well, Real Sexism's already posted. What time exactly, Mike? He's probably talking to you, Marshall. But if you want to leave a comment there, I'm actively viewing it right now. So I will try to read anything that's relevant to what we're discussing. But if you have any questions for my friend Marshall, feel free to ask them and I'll try to get them on there. Marshall's also viewing this, so he'll be happy to answer any questions if he notices any. So we'll start with our first article here. Men must prove a woman said yes under tough new rape rules. Now this was posted on The Telegraph, which is a UK publication. Now some of my American audience members will probably be questioning, why are we looking at the UK if we're here in the US? Well, the logic behind that is anything that happens within the first world affects everything. And as Marshall will later demonstrate, this actually originated with something in California that inspired this. Maybe not directly, but it did have a part in this. So anything that happens in the UK is probably going to affect the US in some way. So it's important to stay on top of these things. Now I'm going to give a quick reading of this. Let me go ahead and give you something to stare at and hate. A nice picture of this woman, Allison Saunders, of the Director of Public Prosecution. Yeah. All right. So men accused of date rape will need to convince police that a woman consented to sex as part of a major change in the way sex offenses are investigated. The Director of Public Prosecution said it was time for the legal system to move beyond the concept of no means no to recognize situations where women may have been unable to give consent. Allison Sanders says that rape victims should no longer be blamed by society if they're too drunk to consent to sex, or if they simply freeze and say nothing because they're terrified of their attacker. Well, if women are too terrified to say no to their attacker, wouldn't they also say yes to their attacker if they're actually afraid? Instead, police and prosecutors must now put a greater onus on rape suspects to demonstrate how the complainant had consented with full capacity and freedom to do so. Well, that seems ridiculous. Campaigners described the move as a huge step forward in ensuring few rapists escape justice. Well, probably ensures that anyone accused of rape gets prosecuted. New guidance will be issued to all police forces and prosecutors as part of a toolkit to move rape investigations into the 21st century. Because before we were doing it in the 19th century. Ms. Sanders said, for too long, society has blamed rape victims for confusing the issue of consent by drinking or dressing provocatively, for example. But it's not they who are confused, it is society itself, and we must challenge that. Just because they're asked if they had a lot to drink or dress provocatively doesn't mean they're being blamed for the rape. They're being asked about the circumstances of it.
Yes, but don't you know it's all about women's feels, not facts.
Of course. Consent to sexual activity is not a gray area. In-law is clearly defined and must be given fully and freely. Well, rape is defined as penetration to someone's orifice. That doesn't sound very clear to me. It's not a crime to drink, but it is a crime for a rapist to target someone who is no longer capable of consenting to sex through drink. What if both people drink? Who's responsible then?
The man.
Of course. These tools take us well beyond the old saying, no means no. It is now well established that many rape victims freeze rather than fight as protective and coping mechanisms. We want police and prosecutors to make sure they ask in every case where consent is an issue, how did the suspect know the complainant was saying yes and doing so freely and knowingly? So if they can prove that, does that counteract a woman who says that she was raped?
No.
Ms. Saunders, who was speaking to the first National Crown Prosecution Service Police Conference on Rape Investigation and Prosecutions in London, try to say that 3 times fast, said the guidance should not only cover situations where someone is incapacitated through drink or drugs, but also where a suspect held by a position of power over the potential victim, a teacher, an employer, a doctor, or a fellow gang member. Gang member? Okay. The ability to consent to sex should be questioned whether the complainant has mental health problems, learning difficulty, or was asleep or unconscious at the time of the alleged act, she says. Are people with learning difficulties being raped?
Occasionally.
The new guidance also covers domestic violence situations where those where the complainant may be financially or otherwise dependent on their alleged rapist. So a woman being financially dependent on a man is a form of rape?
If they choose to define it that way, then yes.
Around 85,000 women per year are victims of rape in the UK, of whom 90% know the perpetrator. How many men? Oh, it doesn't say. Figures.
It doesn't matter.
The most recent figures showed that 15,670 women reported rapes to the police. Then how do you know that 85,000 women were victims of rape if only 15,000 reported it?
False statistics that they gather through question polling. They use a rigged system in that. We'll talk about more about that later.
Oh, yes. Often because they thought it would be impossible to prove the offense, or because they did not have confidence in the police's ability to help them, with only 1,070 convictions resulting from 2,910 cases that go to court. Or many of them were false rape claims, and they knew that if it went to court, it would go nowhere. The rape conference was designed partly to address the long-standing gulf between rape allegations and convictions, as well as the variation between different forces in the way they deal with rape allegations. Metropolitan Police Assistant Commissioner Matt Hewitt, the Association of Chief of Police lead on adult sex offenses, said, as report after report has shown, there is still far too much variation in the way that forces move a complaint of rape through the system. Reporting of sexual offense is up 22% in the latest statistics because of the increased confidence in our service and recording, but we have further to go. We need to tackle the iconic issues of no further action and, particularly, no crimes head on and reduce inconsistencies in our process so that we can send a clear, unequivocal message to victims about how they will be treated. Sarah Green, director of End Violence Against Women Coalition, said, although we have a long way to go in securing justice for all survivors of rape, the new guidance is a huge step forward in that it will help ensure that juries are asked to look in detail at the behavior of defendants as well as that of the complainant, except that we want you to ignore any time of their past where they committed any sort of crime or had any false rape allegations. It makes clear that consent must be sought as well as given, and it spells out issues around power and vulnerability of some victims which police, prosecutors, and ultimately juries should take into account. We believe that broader social attitudes are slowly changing, as for example, we better recognize that girls who are sexually exploited by older men do not consent to their abuse, and that men in positions of power target and abuse vulnerable victims. But the reverse doesn't happen at all. Better recognition of and more justice for these crimes will ultimately help increase the deterrent to commit them. All right, so before I turn the floor over to Marshall, I'm going to go through a couple more articles real quick. This one, this was written on the National NCFM. What's that stand for, real quick?
National Coalition for Men.
Thank you. Why did I forget that? I don't know. But I'm going to read this small. Well, I'm going to read this small section here because I really like this article. It deals with college women, but it kind of deals with this overall issue that men have to prove consent. Boycott college women. Don't have anything to do with them. Don't be left alone near them. You could be accused of harassment. Skipping down. Don't date them. If you have sex, you could be accused of rape in spite of their consent at every stage. And if you don't have sex, the college may have bylaws like the University of Michigan where denying sex is defined as sexual violence. Have sex with her, even if she consents at every point, she could still decide it was rape after the fact. The women in this article show that, oh, but if you deny sex, that's sexual violence. No matter what you do in a relationship, you could be accused, punished, and kicked out of school. Fuck or don't fuck. Still accused, punished, and kicked out. Definitely check out the rest of this article. It's really good. I'm going to read one last thing, and this was submitted by a user, Cyril FM. He or she, I'm not really sure. They pointed me to this article here. So let me go ahead and read this real quick. I'm just going to read the first page of this. There's actually a lot more information here. But this was done by both people mentioned in the article. Let me get that real quick. By Allison Sanders and Martin Hewitt. Rape and sexual abuse against women, men, and children, at least they acknowledge men at this point, is an appalling misuse of power and control which can have a devastating impact on lives. The vast majority of offenses are not reported to police, and more than a third of victims tell no one about their experience. In this context, the drop in the number of reported cases that were referred to the police to the CPS in 2012 and 13 was of particular concern, and why the CPS and police have worked together to look into the reasons behind it, probably because it's not happening as often as people think. The culmination in a national scrutiny panel attended by police, prosecutors, academics, and victims group on 4 April 2014, and out of which comes a detailed action plan. The drop in volume has turned around over the last year, with recent rise in police referrals and the number of cases charged. However, this needs careful monitoring for months and years to come, as do the victims of convictions, and conviction rates have fallen since work has begun. Through this action, we plan to ensure that police and CPS continue this ongoing work. A key finding we identify from our work on the rape scrutiny panel is the need for proper understanding of the legislation of consent. Police and prosecutors must focus their case on the behavior of the accused, not the complainant, and significantly, the panel uncovered some pervasive myth that remain to this day, not only to some police and prosecutors, but perhaps to society as a whole, which may be a barrier to justice for some vulnerable victims. Use some fucking periods in that. That's not just one sentence. Despite efforts to raise awareness, many people still believe a rapist is a man in a balaclava in a dark alley, and a victim is a woman who... What's up?
The word was probably baklava.
Probably. I'm a bad reader. Is a victim, and a victim is a woman who shows her fear through that fight. That is very rarely the case. Most rapists know their victims. Many victims do not physically fight, and the trauma of being raped will affect each victim differently. But a rapist is still a man, and a victim is still a woman, apparently. There is an urgent need to change the discussion on rape. Our police officers, our prosecutors, our courts, and our communities must reject the out-of-date myths and acknowledge the reality of rape. We also need to debate and understand the fundamental issues of consent. I 100% agree with you, but I'm sure we are on different pages. There are issues that go beyond police and prosecution authorities, but we are determined that the actions set out here are not seen by anyone as a plan to file away, rather the next step in a long term of justice in this area. We want everyone involved in criminal justice to read this and sign up to a wider ambition of delivering justice to victims of rape as we have. Finally, we want to express our, well, that's just expressing gratitude. We don't need to read that. All right, so I've bored you long enough with this. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Marshall. Let me go ahead and turn off my screen share. Hold on one second. There we go. I'm just going to turn off my screen share so Marshall can go ahead and use it. So over to you, Marshall.
Well, where do we start with this nonsense? I mean, literally, unmute. Where do we start? There's so many issues at play here.
Honestly, I just don't know. I mean, I guess let's start with where this really started was California.
All right, let's start with California then. I highlighted in the article that I wrote for the National Coalition for Men, which, by the way, that was published by accident. They have a Facebook page, and I happened to post some of my rantings on that particular Facebook page. It just so happens that when I rant, I provide useful information, pertinent information, actual research, and they liked it so much that Harry Crouch, president of NCFM, decided to actually post it as a full article on the National Coalition for Men. I didn't even know they had posted it. I saw it come across my Facebook wall when someone else posted the link, once they shared it on their account, and I was friends with them, and then I saw it. And then I went to National Coalition for Men, and I was like, guys, you can keep this up, but if I knew you wanted to, you know, publish any of my stuff, I'd have done a much better job. That was completely by accident. I had no plans on posting an actual article on National Coalition for Men. I'm honored that they did, quite flattered. It's not my best work, but it's not my worst work either. But in that article, I highlighted how it doesn't matter if a woman provides consent at every single stage of the process, continually, as is required by the Yes Means Yes California Law Code, which, by the way, has since spread to other states. It doesn't matter if she provides consent, because if she claims that she did not provide consent, she can claim she was drunk, she can claim she was drugged, She can claim she only said it because she was in fear for her life. She can make these claims, and she can make these claims several years after the fact, after the supposed incident occurred. After any evidence that she was intoxicated is long since been urinated out of her system, after any evidence that she may or may not have been drugged is long since dissipated from her body, after any evidence of any kind of bruising or any signs of a struggle or any signs that any kind of rape situation went on were long since dissipated, she can make the claim that you committed rape, that she did not consent. And because the accusation itself is being treated as true, you are guilty until proven innocent. She doesn't have to prove that you raped her. You have to prove that you didn't rape her. And since the only measure of evidence against you is her testimony that you did rape her, there is absolutely no possible way that you can actually prove she consented to sex unless you video recorded it with her saying yes, 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 as you were doing something interesting to her, or you audio recorded it, and that's about it. Because anything that she signs, such as some of the little rape kits that are popular on campuses where you have a signed consent form, she can always claim that she signed that under duress. And
Well,
the audio or video recordings can be ruled inadmissible in court. It doesn't matter if it would prove you innocent or not. It can be ruled inadmissible because she didn't consent to being recorded. There is no possible way for you to prove consent.
I have a friend. She goes by the name of Godless Mom. She has her own website, and she is a humanitarian. She's a humanist. She's really big into people who've been falsely imprisoned for bad collection of evidence and trying to raise money for people to get DNA testing to try to prove their innocence. But she herself was raped. And she was raped twice, but the second time she knew the person. It was actually a former friend of hers. And she was all set to go to trial to get him prosecuted, but she found, and this is in Canada, she found that the only evidence they had against the person who couldn't afford their own counsel was her claim that she was raped. They collected no evidence whatsoever. And she perhaps did one of the bravest things I've ever seen of someone. She walked away. She decided not to prosecute because she thought that the court system was unfair to what they were doing to this person. And that's a true humanist right there. Someone who really wants equal rights for all humans despite knowing that the man was guilty.
Right. And that more props to her. That is a fantastic show of humanity's best attributes at play. The fact that she would forego what she is legally owed, which is his punishment for committing a crime against her. The fact that she would forego that and stand up instead for her principles is phenomenal. And I give her much credit and an obscene amount of respect for having done that. You know, she is an example of another reason that I despise the feminist mantra that all women should be respected. Not all people have done something worthy of respect. Your friend, that particular woman, she deserves respect because she stood up for her moral principles and she did not hypocritically back down from them in the interests of revenge. She has a show of devotion to her morals and to her ethics that goes into the realm of being most deserving of respect. That's another reason that I despise that particular feminist concept, is because it downplays women who are actually deserving of respect. And she is one of them. Anyway, here on the screen share, there is an article here. How can those accused of sexual assault, prove consent under yes means yes, which this is what the UK law basically is. It's the California law rebranded in the United Kingdom. That's all it is. It's just a reprinting. It doesn't use all of the same language, but it has the same functionality, the exact same functionality. You must prove consent. Now, once again, because there is no way to actually prove consent, the only way that a man can prove he is innocent is if he proves he was somewhere else doing something else. Because otherwise, under this law, a man can be convicted of raping a woman he has never laid eyes on. All she has to do, if she chooses to do so for whatever reason, all she has to do is point her finger and stipulate said person rapes me. And if she gets even one other person involved, she could say that you raped her at a party that you didn't attend. But if one other person says you attended, then she's got grounds. You were seen at the location, and she claims you raped her, and you claim you didn't even have sex with her. Well, her accusation is being treated as true. You are guilty until proven innocent. You have to prove consent. Since you can't prove that you weren't there and you didn't have sex with her, you have to prove that you had consensual sex with her. And since you can't do that to an event which never occurred, it is impossible to be proven innocent under this law. And it doesn't even matter if you've even seen the woman. If she makes the accusation and she cries those sorrowful tears and activates the oxytocin in all of the jurors, then you're done. You go to prison based on nothing but her accusation. And you may not even have ever seen the woman in person. Forget having sex. Forget hugging and kissing. Forget shaking hands. You may not even have witnessed this human being in person. And yet, if you are accused, you are guilty until proven innocent. You cannot prove that you did not rape her unless you prove that you did not have sex with her.
Well, let's not forget the woman who completely made up a person that said that they went to a school, but they didn't actually attend that school. They didn't even actually exist. And everyone believed this woman was raped despite nothing to corroborate that the person actually existed.
Right, and men faced consequences for that. UVA tried to shut down all of the fraternities on campus. Men were facing consequences for an event which never took place, involving a person who never existed, based on her accusation alone. That is the point society has come to. And then you see, you see broadcasts and you see presentations given by Anita Sarkeesian, Listen and Believe, which, by the way, if you saw that presentation and you saw the room and you didn't immediately think of 1984, then you obviously haven't read the book and haven't seen the movie. Because, seriously, it's out of the playbook, okay? That was supposed to be a cautionary novel, not a step-by-step guide.
It's amazing what a mob mentality can do to a crowd, that if one person cheers, the next person cheers, and all of a sudden you have an entire room cheering, and they believe in the message that's happening because everyone else does. That's how you create a cult, basically, which is what feminism is.
Yeah, it's a religion. It's a cult religion. And by the way, feminists like to claim that false accusations are rare, but in Western society, no, actually, with the invention of DNA evidence, we know for a fact that the false conviction rate for rape is historically higher than what's claimed to be the false accusation rape. It's empirical information. We know what the supposed false accusation rate is, as purported by feminists, and we also know how often rape accusations or rape convictions are overturned by DNA evidence proving the person was innocent. One is greater than the other. It's not propaganda. It's not rhetoric. It's not theoretical. It's not polling by telephone. It's empirical evidence. We know exactly how many cases have been overturned as a result of DNA testing.
And what we also know is how many women have been convicted of perjury or filing false reports of rape when it's been proven that they are lying about it. But women are never convicted of that, or if they are, it's actually very rare.
I actually have statistics on that. In my article, here it is, Rape Culture. Now, the conversation drifted. You asked the question, what about the men? You know, repeatedly, what about the men who are victimized? And I happen to have written an article called Rape Culture, and it's on the honey badgers. You can find it there. And I have some information for you here. Now, this particular clippet was taken from an article written by Hannah Rosen. Yes, author of End of Men, Hannah Rosen. Feminist Hannah Rosen wrote this article. Not the article Rape Culture, the article When Men Are Raped. And here's a quote from it. Data hasn't been collected under the new FBI definition yet, but Stemple parses several other national surveys in her newspaper. The Sexual Victimization of Men in America, New Data Challenging Old Assumptions, co-written with Ian Meyer and published in April 17th edition of American Journal of Public Health. One of those surveys is the 2010 National Intimate Partner and Sexual Violence Survey, for which the Centers for Disease Control invented a category of sexual violence called being made to penetrate. This definition includes victims who were forced to penetrate someone else with their own body parts, either by physical force or coercion, or when the victim was drunk or high or otherwise unable to consent. When those cases were taken into account, the rates of non-consensual sexual contact basically equalized, with 1.27 million women and 1.267 million men claiming to be victims of sexual violence. We have feminist Dr. Mary P. Koss. You know, from the fake 1 in 4 rape statistic.
I fucking hate that cunt.
We all do.
The only time I use that word for women, well, I'm starting to use it for other things, but for her, I hold a special place in hell for that woman.
Agreed. Same woman, thanks to thank for having made to penetrate be added to the roster of classifications in the above CDC report. She lobbied the CDC to exclude male victims of female perpetrators as being classified as rape. Now, if you ask the common person, if you are made to have sex with someone by being physically forced or forced at gunpoint, knife point, coerced with threats of violence, you are unconscious, roofie, comatose, or any other form of incapacitation whereby you are incapable of providing consent or the sexual activity is committed directly against your will, is that rape? The vast majority of people would say yes, that is rape. Anytime someone conducts sex with you either against your consent or while you are incapable of providing consent, it is rape. But not according to the CDC.
Because men have an erection, so that means they wanted sex.
It gets worse than that. Let's use a recent example. Sierra Ross. Ross, 25, stopped and asked a 33-year-old man if he wanted a ride. The man took the offer, but Ross's true intentions became evident when she pulled a gun on the man. She forced the man to get into the back seat and told him to have sex with her friend. The man pleaded for the women to stop after they made him fondle the woman's breasts and butt. Ross then ordered the man to take his clothes off, and her friend began assaulting him sexually. The women also took $200 in credit cards from the man. When he spotted a taxi, he ran from the car naked and jumped in the taxi, and the taxi driver allowed him to use his cell phone to capture the plate number of Ross's vehicle and alert the police. According to the FBI and anyone with two brain cells to rub together, this is rape. This is clearly and undeniably, unabashedly rape. You threaten someone at gunpoint and force them to perform sex, that is rape by any reasonable, rational, logical definition of the term. That is rape. According to the CDC, that is not rape. That is made to penetrate. A lesser sexual assault than
Actually,
rape.
I'm going to disagree with you on one slight point. You say that according to the FBI, according to the law by the FBI as of January 1st, 2013, the law specifically states that rape only occurs when one's orifice is penetrated by force. It has nothing on force to penetrate.
Right, they're using the CDC statistics. In detecting the scope of rape, a review of prevalence research methods, author Mary P. Koss. She's the only listed author, and this article provides a link to where you can download that document. In the Journal of Interpersonal Violence, Volume 8, Issue 2, dated June 1993, page 206. Yes, I will provide you the page number to where you can read this. Direct quote. Although consideration of male victims is within the scope of the legal statutes, it is important to restrict the term rape to instances where male victims were penetrated by offenders. It is inappropriate to consider as a rape victim a man who engages in unwanted sexual intercourse with a woman. Now, doesn't the term unwanted sexual intercourse seem to indicate that consent was not provided? And isn't consent the deciding factor in rape? Seems to be what all the feminists claim. Unless the victim is male, of course. Yeah, then it doesn't matter. Reading on. Read that again a few times if you need to. Pay attention. Instances where male victims were penetrated by offenders. So if a woman uses an object or her fingers to penetrate a man's mouth or anus, it is in fact still rape. However, if a woman uses force, threats, coercion, such as gunpoint, like Sienna Ross, the case above, to force a man to put his penis in her or someone else, despite his protestations, or forces it in herself, such as if he is unconscious from alcohol or date rape drugs, it's not rape. Why? Simple. It is inappropriate to consider as a rape victim a man who engages in unwanted sexual intercourse with a woman. I think most reasonable, rational, logical people would unanimously exclaim from the rooftops that unwanted sexual intercourse, when you have said no, is in fact rape, wouldn't they?
Except that rape is both abuse plus power, or abuse plus privilege. And since women have no power or privilege in our society, they're the only ones that can be raped. And since men have privilege in the society, they can never be raped.
Yeah, which is just, the feminist hypocrisy stacks so deep. It's so deep. Thanks to feminist Mary P. Koss's work with the CDC, no means no no longer applies to men. Feminist Mary P. Koss isn't just a rape apologist. She's a full-blown, verified, shameless victim blamer. She quite clearly, in the same sentence of her own written work, in an official document of the Department of Justice, National Criminal Justice Reference Service, absolves women of raping men by exclaiming, males raped by women are not victims of rape. In the same sentence, she, a feminist, exclaims that the victims of unwanted sexual intercourse are not victims of rape, provided the victim is male and the perpetrator is female. She does more than simply blame the victim. She absolves the perpetrator. I'll say it again. If there is a rape culture, feminists are creating it. And I'd like to point out something real quick.
Go ahead.
Made to penetrate is a lesser sexual assault than rape. Feminists have made it less illegal for a woman to rape a man than for a man to rape a woman. And they want to claim that men are creating a rape culture? Really? We're the ones creating a rape culture? You made it less illegal for a woman to rape a man than for a man to rape a woman. If there was a patriarchy and there was a rape culture, men would have made rape legal before women had the opportunity to vote.
It's very true. One of the things that I'm doing on my YouTube channel, I haven't gotten a whole lot of chance to do videos lately. Real life gets in the way. But I want to give a voice to men that have been falsely accused of rape, that have become victims of rape by feminists. And what I do is I look for these articles, I do a little bit of research, but I read about people who were victim of the justice system, or of the kangaroo court system of colleges, where they were expelled because there was the suggestion that they might be a rapist. The culture that we have today, this rape culture that is created by feminism, your life will be destroyed if you are accused of rape. You could be found innocent by the court system, by the police, but the court of public opinion will always see you as a rapist. Everything about you will be destroyed if people believe it. And it doesn't matter if you can 100% prove that you didn't do it. You could prove that you were on Mars, on a manned mission on Mars, and a woman could still say that you raped her during that time, and you have no way of defending yourself.
There's another little interesting facet regarding that original article that we began the show with. They wanted to define a perpetrator who is in a superior position of power to the victim as being a victim of rape, because the victim feels that they cannot possibly not comply with what this more powerful entity demands from them. Yeah, well, dark secret of juvenile detention centers. 9 out of every 10 reports of sexual abuse are males victimized by female staffers.
I saw a report once that they said that there's a larger percentage of women who are sexually abused in prison than men are. Now, the study itself was very one-sided, but the problem is, even if that's true, look at the actual numbers, and you'll see that, I don't remember what it was, but I think it was like in the thousands that women were raped, and men were raped in like 50,000 compared to their couple of thousand.
Yeah. And by the way, in case you didn't know, here it is. New studies show that 43% of high school and college-age men say they've had unwanted sexual contact, and 95% of those say a female acquaintance was the aggressor. Almost half of young men undergo unwanted sexual contact. 18% raped by the time they enter college.
And if we talk about, women who are afraid to report any rapes that they have to go through, men face even more scrutiny, because if they even try, they'll either be laughed at or told that they didn't, that, oh no, well, you should be lucky that a woman paid attention to you, or the reverse, that, a woman will say, well, no, I didn't rape him, he raped me, and she's automatically believed.
Yeah.
Flat out. Not a rape story, but something that happened to me once. I was a part of a guild for Matrix Online, and in this guild, I kind of had
You
this thing
nerd.
with... What's up?
You nerd.
Yeah, I'm a nerd. I had this
Matrix
thing
Online.
going with another member who was female. I confirmed she was female. And it went on for like several months, and she initiated a lot of the sexual contact that we had with each other. But sooner or later, she just kind of got annoyed with me, but instead of telling me, it's like, look, I'm not interested in doing this anymore, she decided to try to enlist white knights to defend her, and eventually got to like the very top of the guild. So I'm like, okay, that's my cue to leave. I don't want to deal with this anymore. My last day at the guild, I was in the little shout box saying goodbye to everyone, and everyone was like, no, don't leave, and I wouldn't tell them what was going on. I'm like, look, I had some conflict with another member, it's best if I just leave. That's all I ever told people.
It's called relational aggression, and women are studied to be extremely good at it.
She jumped into the chat room, saw that I was leaving, told everyone it was because of her that I was leaving, and that she wanted to leave the guild because she felt bad. And it happened instantaneous that everyone jumped to her aid. Men and women in the guild jumped to her aid. It's like, no, you don't have to leave. He's already leaving. He's a jerk. And I'm like, I haven't done anything wrong, and you're ready to prosecute me because she's crying.
Yeah, of course. Once again, another display of how the Anita Sarkeesian effect is absolute horseshit. Women are not unfairly treated in gaming. I'm sorry, it's just not true. I've been in professional raid guilds that did top tier raiding on WoW, and I played WoW in vanilla, by the way. I even raided. Oh shit! What was that?
You're a nerd.
Shut up. That's why I was calling you a nerd. It's like Matrix Online. You couldn't play something. You couldn't play WoW. At least something halfway normal for a nerd to play. What's wrong with you? Come on.
I actually played Matrix Online and WoW at the same time when WoW first came out, but you can't play two MMOs at the same time.
No, it doesn't work out. You end up forgetting how everything works. I've done that a few times.
Why can't I super jump to the next building? Oh, wait, I'm playing WoW.
Yeah, that's not going to work out at all. In 2004, by the way, the U.S. Department of Education conducted a mass study of university students. 57% of students reporting child sexual abuse cited a male offender, and 42% reported a female offender. So if you have the inclination that women don't abuse children or commit sexual abuse, give up that notion. It simply isn't true. And we also know that from various testing, between 60 and 80% of serial rapists were they themselves sexually abused by a female. And it's not 80% using a small demographic. It's 60% using a small demographic. It's 80% using a large demographic. The various studies that have gone over the topic itself and done in-depth studies, clinical studies that is, they found a near constant. Amongst serial rapists, most of them were sexually abused by a female. It's referred to as reenactment of victimization, the link between children being abused and growing up to be abused, growing up to abuse others, has been extensively researched. Two such work published for peer review were conducted as early as the 1970s. Lewis D. and Ballard D., Delinquency and Psychology. New York, Gruen and Stratton, 1976. Lewis D. and Shannock, SS, Pincus, J.H., Violent Juvenile Delinquents, Psychiatric, Neurological, Psychological, and Abuse Factors, published in J. Child's Psychology, 18, pages 307 through 319 in 1979. This isn't new information. It's just rarely talked about. So if you think the answer is...
Why do we think that this information is not talked about? We know it to be a fact that people who abuse were themselves most likely abused. The idea that someone abuses while they had a perfect livelihood is actually a very uncommon thing. But feminism treats that as absolute fact that men are just born rapists.
Yeah, it's to support their idea. I have a portion in here in the rape study, or in the article Rape Culture. There's something that Mary P. Koss, when she did her original study for Ms. Magazine, let me see if I can find the reference here. One moment, people. I post a lot of information when I do these. Okay, yeah, here it is. Speaking of young boys being raped by women, it segues right into an interesting little dilemma. In the intentionally manipulated study performed by Koss, the one which she magically decides 1 in 4 women will be raped in their lifetime, there's an interesting fact she discovered and simply decided not to share with the world. Her study concluded that over 95% of men will never commit a rape. All male on female rape is quite literally committed by less than 5% of the male population. That doesn't help the feminist agenda, though. It doesn't assist in the constant rhetoric that all men are potential rapists. You can't have a feminist come out and proclaim to the world, yeah, apparently the overwhelming vast majority of men have no interest in and never will rape in their lifetime. Ever. It would completely denounce the Schrodinger's rapist ideological basis for rape culture. Can't have that. What's their solution to the fake problem? Dehumanize all men as being potentially evil and teach men not to rape. The "Don't Be That Guy" campaign comes to mind. If you do a search, you find articles such as "Teach Men Not to Rape" on oh so many feminist and women's websites. "Teach Men Not to Rape" gets 685,000 hits on Google. Zerlina Maxwell has become very popular, being interviewed for publications and talk shows due to an article she wrote, quote, 5 ways we can teach men not to rape. No, you will not find a link to it here. I do not provide links to diatribe like that. You may ask, what does Schrodinger's rapist have to do with young boys? Quite a lot. Clinical, psychological, and data parsing studies have been done quietly, off to the side, just out of frame, for many, many years now. You know what they found out? The majority of actual rapists were they themselves raped as children by women. Difficult pill to swallow, isn't it? We as a society simply do not like to think of women as being pedophiles, child molesters, rapists of children. It almost offends the senses, doesn't it? Too bad. The fact remains. And that's when I went into an article written by Barbara Kay in Women Are Not Always the Gentler Sex. And that's where she states most rapists were subjected to some form of sexual abuse in childhood. A startling amount is perpetrated by females. Peer-reviewed studies conclude that 60 to 80% of rapists, sex offenders, and sexually aggressive men were sexually abused by a female. So, you think the answer is teach men not to rape? Since we know 95% of men will never rape, and we know that 60 to 80% of serial rapists were themselves raped as children by women, I have a more effective suggestion. Instead of berating all men for what only 5% of the population do, how about we teach women not to rape children? That would decrease that 5% margin by at least half. If a rape culture exists, it has been created by feminists, and it's against men and boys. Furthermore, that rape culture is protected by feminists who altered the definition of terms to exclude male rape victims. It is protected by feminists who alter studies to hide their own data showing the vast majority of men will never commit rape. It is protected by feminists who use those same altered studies to claim all men are potential rapists. It is protected by feminists who persist and perpetuate the myth that women can do no wrong and men can do nothing but wrong. It is protected by feminists who lobby for reduced sentences for women, including female sex offenders. It is protected by feminists who lobby universities to change the rules so they can remove men's right to say no. The only rape culture in Western society is the one that discourages male victims from coming forward about the abuse they suffered. The only rape culture in Western society is the one that has intentionally and systematically closed down shelters for abused men. The only rape culture in Western society is the one that allows female perpetrators who are convicted to serve their sentences and rejoin society without registering as sex offenders. The only rape culture in Western society is the one in which children legally incapable of consenting are expected to pay child support to the perpetrators who raped them. The only rape culture in Western society is the one that attempts to victim blame the abused based on biological responses beyond their control by reclassifying their having been raped as made to penetrate. You want to see a rape culture? That is a rape culture. It's against men and boys, created and vehemently supported, encouraged, and protected by feminists.
But let's take this away for a moment. Clearly, not all feminists are like this, right? Right? No,
they do nothing
actually.
to denounce the ones who are.
Because while a feminist, a passive feminist, if you've watched my other shows, you know what I mean by that, will say, well, you know, Mary P. Koss is not actually a feminist because she hates men. Will in the same breath use 1 in 5 women will be raped in their lifetimes. They will support them. And most recently, a study...
by Mary P. Koss.
What's up?
That statistic was created by Mary P. Koss.
Exactly. They
So it
will
either is
denounce
or
her
it isn't.
and
You can't have it
support
both
her
ways.
at the same time. But anyways, I'm writing an article right now. I'm hoping to have it out by middle to late February about a new study that has come out. This new study, you probably have heard about it. I believe it was the 1 in 3 men will commit rape if they can. Which
that's already been denounced.
I know it has been announced, but I want to do a further investigation into it because I've been studying it. Kind of have something for the honey badgers.
Yeah, the Time magazine actually denounced that and said, no, this is completely bogus. They had a microscopic number of volunteers who participated in it, and they were probably just being douchebags.
Actually, a couple of things that I found out about this. One, we can't really say it's like a microscopic amount of people.
No, it was. They pulled very few people.
I understand, but we can't use that as an excuse, and I'll let you know why. You gotta give me a chance to talk a little bit, Marshall.
Oh, sorry.
It's all right. All right, so we can't really say the numbers are bad because not all studies that are done today really have the numbers behind them. We can criticize it for that, but it's really not a valid excuse. But we have to look at a number of other things about what's wrong with this study. First and foremost, it was done as class credit, credit for your for college itself. Taking this survey counted as college credit. So there was an incentive for people who took it. Now, one of the things that are done with this survey, and I know that it was done for this one, is that another small survey is done. It was created by Marlowe in 1960 that will ask you a series of questions about how truthful you are. It will ask you stuff like, when you go to vote for someone, do you get all of the information about a person so you make a conscious vote? And there is an answer that the test wants you to get and an answer it doesn't want you to get. The answer it wants you to get is an indication that you lie to yourself. Now, the people who did this test did this survey to make sure that the people that was answering it was a proper sample size. What I would love to find out is what the result of that test was for all of these men. They didn't include that in any of their studies, but they did include that they had people take this. Now, the second problem, and there was a video that Dean Esme posted, I don't remember who it was, but it was on the Voice for Men website, was someone actually emailed the person who did this survey. And they were using, and I forget the name of the person who originally did the survey like this, but they were using a 1 to 5 scale. And like if anyone answered 1 on whether or not they committed rape, they basically threw out the responses. Honestly, I would do 1 and 2 and just look at 3 through 5, but they threw out for 1. This woman who did this survey did a 1 through 100 scale, and anyone below a 10 was thrown out. Now, if you actually do the math there, a 1 to 5 scale would basically be 1 through 20 and a 0 through 100 scale. But they decided to look at anyone who has a 10% inkling of doing this. But even if we exclude that out, just because someone has the inclination to do something in their fantasy doesn't mean that they're actually capable of doing it. And this is a truth for everyone. In fact, one of the most popular erotica, if you listen to Karen, but I know this myself as being a writer, is rape erotica. That women love to read rape stories. That they're saying, no, no, please don't do this to me, when in their mind they're really saying, yes, do this to me. I want you to ravage me. This is a popular thing that women enjoy in erotica. It's the best-selling kind of erotica. And if we're going to take that, 1 in 3 men could commit rape, then we have to say the same about women. But no one's going to say that about women. No, they're only going to say that men are rapists because they fantasize about it. And I could believe that 1 in 3 men fantasize about rape, but I would never believe that any man, that the majority of men, and we have proof of that only 5% of men commit rape. So 95% men will never act on their impulse, even if they have a desire of it, even if they get off on it, even if they watch rape porn or read rape erotica, they will never act on it. However, this survey has started this process, and Mike actually talked about this at his college, where a woman, an official at a college, actually stated in an assembly, be careful of men. 33% of them is going to try to rape you. Told this to college girls. And it made a lot of the women feel uncomfortable being surrounded by a lot of men. And this is all about doing as much damage as possible.
Right, it's propaganda. By the way, I'm screen sharing a image that I created. It was to provide an example of a feminist who was supported by other feminists who is a pedophile. She is undeniably a pedophile. Feminist Germaine Greer published a book called The Beautiful Boy, or just The Boy, in 2003. Its avowed intention was to, and I quote, advance women's reclamation of their capacity for the right to visual pleasure. The book contains some 200 images of boys in various states of undress, including nude. The book generated some controversy because, quote, society is not accustomed to seeing beauty in young males, Greer claims. Greer has described the book as full of pictures of ravishing pre-adult boys with hairless chests, wide apart legs, and slim waists. She goes on to say, I know that the only people who are supposed to like looking at pictures of boys are a subgroup of gay men. She wrote in London's Daily Telegraph. Well, I'd like to reclaim for women the right to appreciate the short-lived beauty of boys, real boys, not simpering 30-year-olds with shaved chests. When she was criticized for these comments, with some writers labeling her a pedophile, Germaine Greer responded vigorously on Andrew Denton's television talk show, Enough Rope. Here's the thing. If pictures of pre-adult boys sexually excite you, and young-looking adults do not, then the age of the subject is the determining factor in your attraction. If you're sexually excited by pre-adult children, and specifically because they are not adults, you are a pedophile. Rights to visual pleasure of ravishing pre-adult boys with hairless chests and wide apart legs, and not only is this a feminist publication, but feminists supported Greer and this book. Worse, Greer conflates this publication of pragmatic pedophilia as a right of all women to enjoy. Well, feminists, I can say with certainty most women are not pedophiles, and many mothers with young sons would end you if you ever touched their children. A feminist book filled with nude images of male children glorifying pedophilia of pre-adult boys. Tell me some more about the rampant sexualization of women by men and the rape culture created by men.
Well, I want to kind of interject here just a moment. I want to try to end this within the next 25 minutes or so. But I kind of want to go back to the main point of what this video was about, proving consent. But this is all good stuff, and I want everyone to think about this. What me and Marshall are talking about, we're not making this stuff up. This is stuff that's out there. Feminists don't want to talk about it. They don't want to bring it up. But this is stuff that is out there. We don't even really have to look that hard for it, and that's what the sad thing is. And he's talking about rape culture that's created by feminism. I 100% agree with that. There is a rape culture out there, and it's nothing like what the feminists are saying. What they're talking about is propaganda. They want you to look at the emotions of a situation rather than the truth of the situation. And if you even question the emotions that they express they have, you are a misogynist. You hate women. It doesn't matter that boys are actually being more of a victim than women are. If you talk against a woman, you hate women. You talk against a man, you hate women. That's just the way our culture is. But getting back to the main subject, I mean, this is all great stuff, Marshall. I really love your brain. But what we're seeing with this having to prove consent every step of the way, and that a woman can still say that you didn't give consent, is changing, trying to force the change of laws that no woman can ever commit rape. And feminists will tell us, and this is really the ultimate point of this video, is women will try to convince you that women don't commit rape and that it's almost impossible. And yet we show you evidence after evidence after evidence that it happens. And this is going to lead to a very destructive society. Because if men cannot be given the representation as victims that women are given, it's going to have a negative effect on society as a whole. If you constantly treat men as being rapists, they'll be more inclined to do it. Not because they're inherently bad, but if you treat someone as bad, they're always going to be bad. It's like having a dog that you abuse, that you kick around, that you pick up and throw them just because. What's going to happen is they're going to get mean. They're going to get aggressive with you. They're going to try to fight you. Not at first. They're going to be very submissive, but you abuse them long enough, they're going to turn on you, and they're going to try to kill you. And if we constantly keep living in this culture that blames men for being men, they're eventually going to turn against society. Now, I'm not saying that men are going to become psychopaths or going to be rapists themselves, although I think some men will start doing that if they're going to be treated like that long enough. But what's going to happen is the MGTOW movement is going to grow in power. Now, I have nothing directly against the MGTOW movement, but I myself am not a MGTOW. Men going their own way. I know Marshall is, but the thing is that the MGTOW movement doesn't, really just wants to be left alone. Men going their own ways and being left alone, and only contributing to society that supports them. And this is dangerous for society, but this is what feminism is pushing men to do. If they cannot get equal rights, they don't want to be a part of the system. They want to create their own system to where they're happy. And this is what's going to happen. We've already seen evidence of this, of the marriage rate starting to drop. That if people get married, they marry at a later age than they used to. And that many people are not even getting married anymore because the system is designed to support women. And yes, we're talking about rape right now. That's what the conversation of this video is about having to prove that the person you had sex with gave you actual consent, had the opportunity to give you consent, but that doesn't matter. Even if you can prove that, it doesn't matter in the slightest, because all a woman has to do is, sorry for that, Marshall. All a woman has to do is say, he raped me. Oh yeah, I gave him consent, but I was afraid that if I didn't, he would harm me. Consent is really not even the issue here. What's really at stake here is that a woman's voice, a woman's opinion outweighs anything a man says. And that is true today. It has been 100 years. That anything a woman says is automatically believed over a man. Look at the current state of the MRA. Or the men's rights. I'm not supposed to say the MRA anymore. Men's rights. Who has the most powerful voice in the men's rights movement? Women do.
Women.
They do. And they know they do, and it's unfair. I have some of the women tell me, or encouraging me to have a voice, but they are like, it's a sad state that I have more voice than you, and this is directly affecting you more. But this is what our society is. And this is what it's going to continue to be until we fight this system. And that's why we need to start having voices more as males. Yeah, no one's really going to listen to me, but we still have to try. We still have to fight this. And this is one more nail in the coffin of men. We cannot allow this to happen. Those in the UK, I urge you to do whatever you can to fight it. I know it's not easy because me being here in Arizona, I can't really call my congressman. I can't call up McCain because McCain has statistically proven that he works against the people and is only caring about big businesses and the religious right. I can't convince him to do anything, even if I call him. So I understand that there is an insurmountable odds of trying to change the system, but we still have to try. And that's why this is such an important thing. And I'm sorry to monopolize the conversation here, Marshall, but this really needs to be said. This is why we are doing what we're doing. We're not just talking, we're actually trying to get things out there for everyone to hear, to understand the truth. And that's what I love about Marshall here is, he's quick with all of these factoids, many stuff I didn't even know about, but I'm not surprised about. How often women are getting away with crimes that they want everyone to believe that men are only capable of doing.
Speaking to the issue of MGTOW growing, in one of my more recent articles, I wrote one specifically about MGTOW in and of itself. And MadCat here is exactly correct. If you continue to enact laws which unjustly persecute men and allow innocent men to go to prison, you will only see the MGTOW movement grow. And to highlight this, to put an absolute cap on it, I took a portion of Shakespeare, perhaps one of his most famous works, A Merchant in Venice, Act 3, Scene 1, Shylock. You've probably heard it referenced other places. I took it and modified it. It's an accurate parody. I replaced the Jew-Christian dynamic with man-woman. So it's 100% accurate to the original, and yet it's slightly been changed just to reflect the difference between men and women in this society. And you can see it on the screen share now, and I'd like to read this real quick. To bait fish withal, if it will feed nothing else, it will feed my revenge. She hath disgraced me, and hindered me 500,000, laughed at my losses, mocked at my gains, scorned my nation, thwarted my bargains, cooled my friends, heated mine enemies. And what's her reason? I am a man. Hath not a man eyes? Hath not a man hands, organs, dimensions, senses, affections, passions? Fed with the same food, hurt with the same weapons, subject to the same diseases, healed by the same means, warmed and cooled by the same winter and summer, as a woman is? If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And if you wrong us, shall we not revenge? If we are like you in the rest, we will resemble you in that. If a man wrong a woman, what is his humility? Revenge. If a woman wrong a man, what should her sufferance be by women's example? Why, MGTOW. The villainy you teach me I will execute, and it shall go hard, but I will better the instruction.
That is really good, and how easy it is to tie it into what's going on today, just replacing a few key words. Kind of reminds me of the video series I saw about how Metal Gear Solid 2 predicted the social justice warrior movement.
Yeah,
and it's scary how, like in 2001, Hideo Kojima was able to write a story that actually came true.
The future is easily predicted if you just look at the winds of change and you examine the cause and effect of relationships. It's basic systems theory.
It's a great video if anyone hasn't checked it out already, but the basic point is that the internet is full of useless information that is passed as fact, that we don't even need to actually get the truth of the situation. All that is really required is the emotion of a situation. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. And that's what I think of when you read that Merchant of Venice play, is exactly that, is that any wrong that a man can do to a woman is considered the worst thing possible, but any wrong that a woman does to a man is considered to be a virtue.
Almost.
We celebrate when women do bad things to men. Hell, there's a woman in Canada, and I can't remember her name for the life of me, who actually helped a man commit rape and murder. Now, she used a battered wife defense and actually got her off, but then evidence came later that she was actually guilty and went to jail, and I'm sorry if I'm messing up this story at all, but actually got out of prison because of feminist groups, and she was able to remarry and have children.
Yep, and she roams society freely today.
But feminism idolizes her. Feminism says, well, she's a woman. She didn't commit any bad. Yeah, she killed, but, it was only men, so what does it matter? Which, by the way, she helped her husband rape and kill her own sister.
Lovely. Speaking to what you were discussing about seeing the MGTOW movement grow, and even men who aren't members of MGTOW, even men who don't know what MGTOW is. I'm screen sharing now. I think it's a little futzed. There we go. That's better. Yeah, time.com. There's an article about why it is now projected that 25% of millennials will never get married. 25%. And this, by the way, is the first time in the history of the United States, the 230-something years that the United States has existed. This is the first time ever that the number of unmarried adults outnumbers the number of married adults. Divorce rate is 50%. 70% of all divorces are filed by women. The vast majority of prenuptial agreements are thrown out of court. The game is fixed. The fix is in, kids. The deck is stacked. It's not in men's favor, and guess what? Men notice, and they're starting to pull away from you. They're refusing to get married because they're not being treated fairly, because they're not being given a fair shake. They're being unjustly persecuted in the court system. Marriage today in America has been so manipulated that it has literally become the legal definition of extortion.
There's a recent article I read on A Voice for Men. I think it was on there. I believe Dean Esme. I see a lot of things that Dean Esme does on Twitter, so I'm always reading it. But it was a recent thing about this man who is actually trying to pursue a suit against the district attorney of Santa Barbara. I believe that's what it said. But basically, he was discriminated against for being a man because he basically supported a woman financially, and not just like, pay her way a little bit. I mean, we're talking like he'd spend $1,000 for her to go to the spa. He helped her. He bought her a condo. He did all of these things, and the moment he wanted to leave her, this DA and this woman who was wronged by him tried to hurt him financially, tried to do everything they could to get him arrested. They forced him to wear a GPS device. She got a restraining order on him and didn't tell him, and caused him to violate that restraining order even though he wasn't aware that it existed.
Right, by showing up where he was when she found out where he was. That's right. Common, by the way. That's extremely common.
And this, I mean, Hannah Wallen has talked about this. If you ever check out her work, she goes into a great detail about it. But this is the reality of it. You get married, you're stuck for life. You have to hope that if you get a divorce, they'll be amicable, but they're probably not going to be because the system favors them. Right. If you have children involved in this, they can say to the courts that you sexually abuse the children, even if there's no proof, and the court will say, well, you know what, we're not going to leave them with the father then. We're going to take them away from the father based on a lie. It's not worth getting married. I used to be kind of depressed because I'm like nearly 35 and I haven't been married yet. And like there's less likely chance that I'm going to get married. But now seeing the way the system works, I am so fucking glad that I'm not married. Honestly, I'm not too far off from being MGTOW. I'm not there yet, but the way things are going, I'm probably going to be one within the next 5 years.
Yeah. Uh, in my article, MGTOW, A Boycotting of Women, I point out the fact I literally have a link to the free legal dictionary dot thefreedictionary.com/extortion. Quote, extortion, the obtaining of property from another induced by wrongful use of actual or threatened force, violence, or fear, or under color of official right. Invalidation of prenuptial agreements plus no-fault divorce equals seizure of liquid assets plus alimony. Marriage today in America is identical to the legal definition of extortion. It is, quote, the obtaining of property from another induced under color of official right. The legal system has been manipulated to make marriage the legal definition of extortion. No ands, ifs, or buts about it. It is, by strict legal definition, extortion.
And I don't remember if this was part of the California law that got passed about yes means yes, but I remember reading at the same time that they want to pass a law that would allow a woman to state that she got raped within a 30-year timeline of being married. So 30 years prior to that, while she was married, she can claim at any point that she was raped. And
Yeah.
this is what scares me about the whole rape culture in America or in any first world country, is that, you know, something like that, saying that you got raped 30 years ago but never reported it, there's no evidence. I mean, it's hard enough to collect evidence when rape actually happens, and yes, I'll acknowledge that it's often difficult to prove a rape actually happened. But after, you know, a year, you have to rely mostly on the testimony of the victim, especially after 10 years. You have to rely entirely on that. And now with the yes means yes, and you have to prove consent, you have to prove, you know, up to 30 years that you got consent from a person, which it's nice to say that, but we all know that's complete bullshit. It's complete bullshit that you have to prove anything, because it doesn't matter if you prove it or not. It's still her word versus a man's. And
Right.
women will always win that fight.
Yep, because men do not elicit oxytocin responses. No one cares about men. By the way, in regards to false claims of child abuse, here's an interesting little case that you may find fascinating. A Florida woman who filed 28 fraudulent reports of child abuse says she did it to create havoc. See, 27 was fine, but 28, hey, that's pushing it. 28 fraudulent reports, specifically to create havoc. 28 false reports, because 27 isn't enough false reports to the police. No, 28, that's the magic number. That's where they draw the line in the sand. 27 is, that's pushing it. 28, okay, you're out of line, missy. 28 fraudulent reports of child abuse against 2 households.
Well, you know, for every 10 false fraudulent reports, she gets a free sandwich at Subway. But they kind of caught on.
Yeah, but it's only
when she was trying to get her third sandwich.
The free sandwich coupon is only good for the 6-inch though. It's not the foot long. You got to go for the foot long. That's her problem. She went for the 30. She went for the foot long, and that's how she got caught. She got greedy. She got greedy.
I was actually having a conversation with a friend, and we're going to end very soon, but I want to tell this story, and then we'll have some closing comments. A friend of mine I was talking to the other day, she said that, you know, to joke about dead puppies and dead kittens actually kind of disgusts her, but to joke about dead babies doesn't really bother her. And that's actually a true statement for society as a whole. That when we look at an animal such as a dog or a cat, it elicits a empathy sensation inside of us that we have to protect animals, whereas other humans, we feel less of that. But when we look at humans, we feel it more for women than we do for men. Men and women will always come to the aid of other women, but next to nobody will come to the aid of a man. And this is really where we see the division in society. And Marshall's talking about oxytocin levels, and that's exactly what this is. We will feel sympathy if we see a cat that's ran over, or someone is abusing a cat, or we see a news report of mistreatment of animals. But we could see the same thing in humans, and it elicits less of an effect.
Indeed.
So it's something to think about when looking at all of this is, why is it we care more about women than we do about men? And partly it's because there's this overwhelming need to protect women. And it's not about white knighting, it's just an inherent need that we have. Because I see other women do it to women as well. That they will rush to them and help them in any way they can. All they have to do is cry, and women will be on the ready to protect her from any perceived evil there is. And if the perceived evil is a man, they will instantly hate the man before they even consider the possibility that they're being manipulated by the female. And even if it's later they find out that they were manipulated by the female, they're still less likely to trust the male in the situation. This is the society we live in. This is why MGTOW exists. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. This has been a great conversation. Is there any last things you'd like to say, Marshall?
Yeah, not particularly. I think we covered everything pretty efficiently, and I will be providing links to all the various studies and all the various articles that were discussed throughout this broadcast to Mad Cat so that he can put them in the low bar for you. I hate to give you extra work, Mad, but you know, we covered a lot of information, and not everyone's going to be able to find it just by having looked at my screenshots, you know.
No, definitely. I'm glad that you provide that information for me. I'd like to provide that information for everyone. And yeah, if you guys want to send me a message on YouTube, you can go ahead and do so, and I'll try to answer any questions you have about this. Is there a way someone can contact you, Marshall?
Yeah, I can be contacted through YouTube as well, Observing Libertarian. I also have a Twitter account. It is at SEE_Libertarian. So instead of Observing Libertarian, it's at C_Libertarian, because Observing Libertarian is just too long for that.
I will provide that in the bar down below.
That'd be appreciated.
As well as mine as well.
I often respond to commenters who comment on my articles on the Honey Badger Brigade. So if you read through one of my articles and there's something that you'd like more information on, or you'd like a comment, or you want to try and detract from something I've written, I invite people to do so, but be prepared for a war of logic.
All right. Well, I don't really have any real closing statements, but I do want to say thank you, Marshall, for agreeing to come on, and I definitely invite you to come back. It's great chatting with you.
Anytime.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close off. Thank you for everyone who came into the room. I mostly have Marshall to thank for that, but I do love the comments. I am definitely reading everything that you guys write on there. Real Sexism, I did see your comments on that. I will try to respond back to you as quick as I can. Beyond that, this is Mad Cat signing off.